A warm welcome to today's video explaining the criticisms of moral anti-realism for philosophy A-level. Now, the first criticism that we need to understand is about the way that we use moral language. Now, moral language is complex, and moral disagreement and moral argument are complex and nuanced. It is election time in the UK when I'm recording this, and if you listen to the debates, lots of them are debating the facts of the matter, the is statements, but there's also argument about the ought statements that politicians and voters make. So, in emotivism, for example, all that moral language is for is booing or hooray and expressing your emotion on a given issue. But we go into the real world, we hear moral disagreement, we hear argument on moral issues, and that doesn't seem to be the case. It doesn't seem to be quite as simple as prescribing, or as simple as expressing your emotion, as the anti-realist would like to make out. And the problem is that in anti-realism, for air, for example, we can argue about the is statements, the matters of fact about the world. If I have a disagreement about a packet of crisps, for example, about my favourite flavour and yours, I could say, well, my favourite, salt and vinegar, has a certain fat content and it has a certain amount of grams of salt in, and we can argue about those facts. But ultimately, when it gets to the normative claims, when it gets to the ought claims that salt and vinegar is better than cheese and onion, that salt and vinegar is more moral than cheese and onion, when I make those claims, we can't argue about those in anti-realism. And so we can argue about the facts, but we simply can't argue. We have this irresolvable difference about the moral claims that we make. And this doesn't match up with the real world. And that's the problem here. Because there's no objective standard to appeal to, we've got to end up just agreeing to disagree on our ought claims about the world. We end up just booing and hooraying, and these ultimately are just irrational or irrational things that we can't resolve. And that's an uncomfortable reality if you accept anti-realism. The next criticism is about moral progress. So, when we are using like a naturalist theory, like utilitarianism, we can say that society now is better than it was 200 years ago, because we have more people who are suffering less and who have more happiness, general happiness in the world. But anti-realism can't do that. We can say that, like, hooray society today, and society we can say, I prefer, my emotion is that it's better now, but we don't have any objective ground to say that slavery and the abolition of slavery is a good thing, or that equal rights and the fact that everyone is more equal than they were 200 years ago, that's a good thing. In the same way that we can't say that the Nazi regime was wrong. We can say that, like, boo Nazis, but we can't, with any objectivity, we can't say that that's wrong. And that's a very uncomfortable conclusion of anti-realism. We can say that my opinion is that I don't like it, my value judgment is that it's bad, boo Nazis, but I can't extend it any more strongly than that. Lawmaking, for example, here is a problem, because it ends up just being like a law being based on this irrational thing, boo murder. And for some, that's a very uncomfortable conclusion as well. Finally, we move on to the issue of nihilism. So, nihilism is basically the devaluing of X. So saying X doesn't matter. In this case, X is morality. And so, does anti-realism lead to moral nihilism? And if it does, it would mean, if it does lead to nihilism, we would have to stop making moral statements altogether, because they're not important, they're not true, they're not valuable. Now, if I was to say, listen to this really good theory of epistemology I came up with, and you listen in, and I say, just don't worry about knowledge, like, just forget about it. Okay, imagine that's what I said. That is a terrible theory of epistemology, of knowledge. If I just say, yeah, don't worry about knowledge, just don't worry. In the same way that if an ethical theory or a meta-ethical theory leads to a rejection of the importance of ethics, then that ethical theory is a terrible one, because it discounts the thing that it's trying to do. If it shows you that ethics doesn't matter at all, and it's an ethical theory, well then you sort of miss the whole point. And so if anti-realism, because there are no objective values, moral values, that is, no objective ought statements in the world, then that leads, or it may lead for you, it may lead to nihilism. And if it convinces you of nihilism, if it convinces you that morality doesn't matter, well, then that is a terrible ethical theory, or a terrible meta-ethical theory. And so if anti-realism leads to nihilism, if it leads to you saying, oh, this is useless, then anti-realism fails. Because it isn't strong enough to protect from the force of nihilism, the force of devaluing ethics. I hope this video has been helpful in your understanding. Please share it with your classmates. Thank you for watching.